Welcome back to Plant-Based Kidneys Kitchen. Michelle Crosmer here, and we're making dessert today. I will be honest, I am not a big dessert person. I don't have a big sweet tooth, and I don't really enjoy baking because I can't take things out of the recipe or change it as easily. It can affect how well it cooks, the texture, the consistency. I'm not against it. If you guys have baked goods that you want to see made better for people with kidney disease, then you can, of course, drop that in the comments, and I'm up for the challenge. But today we're making a dessert that we don't have to bake. It's my favorite sweet treat, and it's peanut butter oat balls. And it's really easy to make, and there's barely any ingredients. So what you need to make sure you have: one bowl for the dry ingredients, one bowl for the wet ingredients, and then a pan with some parchment paper on top. That's what we're going to put the balls on once we make them, and then they go in the freezer, not in the oven. So first you want to mix the dry ingredients. So we are going to use oatmeal, dried oats. You can use whole rolled oats, or you can use quick oats. You don't want to use steel cut oats. And we're going to do 1 cup. We're going to measure out 1 cup. Put that into our mixing bowl. Next, we're going to use a 1/8 cup measuring cup. If you don't have that, then it would be 2 tablespoons would be the equivalent. So either 1/8 cup or 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. And again, this is going in our dry ingredient mixing bowl. So it's going with the oats. And then we're going to do the same amount, 1/8 cup or 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. And that's it for the dry ingredients. If you want to add cinnamon or like a pumpkin pie spice seasoning, then you're more than welcome to do that, and that would taste good. But that's all that I like to do. There's some versions of this recipe I've made where I either do dark chocolate chips or unsweetened coconut shreds or cacao nibs. Those are all options, but this is kind of the basics. You don't need all of that stuff, and this keeps it a lot more simple. So we have our dry ingredients. Now in the next bowl, we're going to mix our wet ingredients. That is going to be, so peanut butter. You want to make sure you're getting a peanut butter that is just peanuts as the only ingredient, or if it's peanuts and salt, then you want to make sure it's low sodium, less than 140 milligrams of sodium per serving. And so you can check that on the label, but ideally unsweetened, no oil, no salt, no sugar added to it. So that is going to be 1/2 cup of your peanut butter. And this is going in your separate mixing bowl now. So this is the wet ingredient mixing bowl. Scrape all that yummy peanut butter out. You are welcome to use a different nut butter if you want. So if you prefer almond butter or cashew butter or sun butter or some other seed butter, that's totally fine. But you're going to do 1/2 cup of peanut butter. Then you're going to do 1/4 cup of a pure maple syrup. That is going to be our sweetener for this dish. And if seeing all of this sugar gives you anxiety, I get it. This recipe makes 16 servings, so this amount is broken up, and per serving, the total amount of sugar is 3.5 grams of added sugar, so it's less than a teaspoon of sugar per serving. So that amount goes a long way. Then the next wet ingredient is going to be vanilla extract, and we only need a teaspoon of that. So we'll add that in. Perfect. And that's it for the wet ingredients. Again, super easy. I'm going to mix all those wet ingredients up. And then once the wet ingredients are all mixed, all you're going to do is take your dry ingredients and you're going to add it to the wet. What you can do is add about half of it, mix it up a little bit, and then add the other half, just that way it's easier to mix. If your peanut butter has been in the fridge, which it will be if it's a more natural peanut butter and doesn't have oil and stuff added to it, then you might want to let it sit out for a couple of minutes before you make these, just that way it's softer and easier to stir. Ultimately, you are just going to mix this up. Honestly, it smells so good. Smell of maple syrup and peanut butter together. Okay, so mix this all up. So to portion the balls, you want to make them about 1 tablespoon portion. So you can be exact, kind of like a heaping tablespoon, and measure it all out. But you're just going to scoop that amount out Make sure you have clean hands. If you need to get your hands a little bit wet, that way it doesn't stick, you could do that, but you're just going to form balls about that size, and you're going to put it right onto your baking sheet that has your parchment paper. And that's it. You're going to get a little sticky. It's going to get a little messy, but then what you do is you're just going to mix these balls. Again, I said it makes about 16 balls, and then you're going to put it in the freezer. You want to put it in the freezer at least 30 to 60 minutes, but it really tastes better if it's been in the freezer longer. Really, I mean, a few hours or even overnight, I think they always taste better the next day because they're more hard. If you don't like them to be as hard, I think they kind of give off a cookie dough type of texture when they're out of the freezer because they're cold and they're harder, but you by all means can do them in the fridge if you like them to be softer, or of course if you have any chewing difficulty, then you wouldn't want them to be in the freezer. Let's talk nutrition information for the balls. So again, the recipe makes 16 balls. So per ball, and one serving is a ball. Again, this is a sweet treat. This is dessert. This isn't a, hey, I'm going to eat 5 for breakfast. So per serving, which is one ball, it is going to be 93 calories, 3 grams of protein, 3 milligrams of sodium. That is if you're using a peanut butter that is unsalted. If you have a salted peanut butter, then that'll be a little bit saltier. But again, it's going to be split up against 16 servings and it's not going to be a lot. 87 milligrams of potassium, 59 milligrams of phosphorus, 9 grams of carbs, 1.5 grams of fiber, and 3.5 grams of added sugar. And so important thing to note there again, 3.5 grams of added sugar is just under a teaspoon of sugar. And so that's a good thing to keep in mind if you're looking at any sort of sweet treat or dessert. If you can keep it to only 4 to 5 grams of added sugar or less, that's a good rule of thumb because that's a very small amount of added sugar. If you are in the double digits for added sugar, or if you were to eat like 3 of these balls, then of course that is too much added sugar at one time, and that's closer to a tablespoon of added sugar. So again, you're going to keep forming your balls. These are a great sweet treat. Keep them in the freezer. I will show you what they look like after, but pretty much this goes in the freezer after 30 to 60 minutes. You can transfer it to an airtight container. And then once you transfer it to an airtight container, keep it in the freezer and enjoy. Again, it's a good sweet treat. The potassium, the phosphorus is not too high. Protein is not too high either. But again, if you are on dialysis and you have higher protein needs and you need to add more protein, you can always talk with your dietitian about adding whatever protein powder you use to the recipe. That's always an option. And then if you have kidney disease and you're not on dialysis and you're looking to limit protein, then of course it's only 3 grams of protein per serving. All right, it's been about an hour. I took these out of the freezer and I'm going to put them in a container, seal them up, and then keep them in the freezer. Another note is some of them don't make the most round ball. Some of them are better than others. If your peanut butter is completely room temperature, like you just opened it up and stirred it up, then you might want to put it in the fridge for a little before you mix it. That was the mistake that I made, and so it was very soft. You saw how it stuck to my hands. Or if it's been in the fridge for several days or several weeks, you might want to let it thaw a little bit before you make them so it's not too hard to mix. And then that's how you find the perfect medium. Again, it makes about 16 balls if you do 1 tablespoon portion. If you're using like a spoon or you're doing heaping tablespoons, you might get 14. But ultimately, you're just going to store them in your container, put them in the freezer, and enjoy as a sweet treat.